You're a conservative Christian man with traditional values. What about all those people who don't share those views? How are you going to connect to them? That question was asked by Juanita Phillips of the ubiquitous ABC to Dom Perrottet 2 days ago. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's why I've got involved in CPAC as the Executive Chairman. I'd like to acknowledge Lyndall Maloney, my fellow director, who's here, and of course, the founder and National Director, Andrew Cooper, who's also with us tonight. Friends, CPAC is going to develop into an organisation, and that organisation is going to stand up for the values that we all hold. It's not a party political organisation, but we do intend to actually create a proper not-for-profit company, and that we already have done. We intend to fundraise to support our values and also our candidates and existing MPs throughout the nation, with a particular focus federally. But as we grow in terms of staff and capability, we also wish to do so in jurisdictions like Queensland, New South Wales, etc., as time allows. I don't want to cover too much tonight other than to say it's important that you're here tonight. It's important that we speak out, and CPAC will be a safe haven for conservative people to express their conservative values. But it will be more than that. It'll also be an organisation that takes action. We will lobby, we will campaign, we will raise funds, and we will support and get behind people of conservative values. Thanks so much for being here, and I'd like to now hand over to our founder, Andrew Cooper, to say a few words.
Thanks, Roger. How good are those Americans, right? Like, they backed us, and they didn't ask for anything. And that video that was played in the US 18 months ago, in 2020, in DC, in Maryland. And some people in the room came with us to DC, and Robert and Lyndall. I hope, is there anyone else in the room? Not sure. Yeah, Bryson came as well, and it was just magnificent, wasn't it? And those Americans, they are so. The thing about Americans is that they're so immersed in their values, and they will go as far as they need to go, because in their heart, deep inside them, they believe in the values. And I feel here in Australia, we've missed that. You know, we're missing that now. Our political parties, I think across the board, actually have lost their value set. I think to me, I think political parties are probably, not surprisingly, just totally convinced that winning is all that matters. That's what CPAC's about. We don't have any candidacies to hand out. We don't have any political favors to give. But what we are and what we will be is an organisation that, if you believe in those true, and I call them classical conservative values, values where capitalism is not a dirty word, because it's the only system that allows democracies to function properly, where classical liberalism, small government and individual responsibility reign supreme. It's these sort of values that most organisations have lost, particularly the political parties. So what is CPAC? Roger mentioned that it's a non-profit organisation. It's backed by, already backed by some impressive people, most of whom don't want to be publicly exposed, and we know why, don't we? We know why they don't want to be, because there are consequences to poking your head above the, above the parapet, and so we must respect that. But there are others. We have a founding advisory board and founding members of the organisation. Warren Mundine is our chairman of the advisory board, and he would love to be here tonight. But unfortunately, well, we know who's in charge here in Queensland, and yeah, booing is okay. Don't. The Honourable Gary Hargrave is also one of our founding members, and Gary's on doing his show tonight on Sky, and we'll try to be here as well. The Honourable Ross Cameron. Now, if anyone has been to a CPAC and heard Ross Cameron speak eloquently about Marcus Aurelius, and you know, I have great appreciation for Ross. He's an interesting character, and Ross, if you're out there in live stream land listening to this, you know what, I love you. I love you, man. You're a wonderful human being. And Stephen Baxter. Stephen Baxter is the past chief entrepreneur of in Queensland here, and Steve understands how harmful government can be, just in stopping our individual liberties, but in stifling progress, stifling the flourishing of businesses, and stifling human flourishing. So Stephen's involved as well, and he's one of the few. Well, you know, he's a tough nut, Steve. I've got the greatest respect for Steve. And Steve, if you're watching, mate, appreciate your support. There are others that support us as well, and I won't name them. Perhaps I'll let them out themselves. We have another video.
The great political struggle of any age is not a public relations contest. It is a battle of ideas. And one of the great political struggle of any age is not a public relations contest. It is a battle of ideas. And one of the great benefits of an organisation such as CPAC and a conference such as yours is that it brings together people who have a capacity to argue the case.
We can push back against the ridiculousness of far-left extreme movements that are divisive and damaging.
You guys are the future. The future of all Western countries is a conservative, classical, liberal future.
And in these times, when those founding principles are so under attack, it's just a great opportunity to get there and talk to people of a like mind.
As to whether or not we will continue to defend and value real Western values, or whether we are to go down the road of a new illiberal authoritarianism that assumes that the state knows best.
You're being a part of making sure people understand why these values need to be a part of our future. Free market, individual responsibility, strong civil society, strong families, free speech, protection of private property, and individual liberty.
So Australians, join with us.
CPAC and conservative principles are the best solutions for any country in the globe.
Have a great CPAC.
CPAC 2021 promises to be exciting. You'll be rewarded, you'll be energised. Hope to see you there. See you there.
Unfortunately, Eric, CPAC 2021 had to be pulled. That's not going to stop us. We're planning CPAC 2022. It'll be in Sydney. We'll get 2,000 people there, and I hope everyone in this room comes and attends. It's important. If you haven't been to a CPAC, you don't know what you're missing. And we'll have some great international speakers, won't we, Robert?
Absolutely.
I know you're workshopping one that'll just blow people's minds. Mind blowing. Yeah. It was interesting. Amanda Stoker will be arriving soon. She's running late. I'm sorry about that. The life of a senator, right? She mentioned free speech. I was invited to attend or be a panelist on a free speech show on the ABC before a live audience last night, and I kind of knew what I was going into. There were 4 panelists, and there was a moderator, a compere, and there were 3 designated questioners in the crowd. and a couple of people in this room went to it actually. And it was kind of interesting in that, they love diversity, the ABC. But they didn't like the opinion that I put forward. And my opinion was the only one that differed from the other 7. Diversity of colour, or diversity of gender, perhaps. There weren't too many men there either, but I mean, diversity of opinion and free speech and the ability to debate has to be one of our absolutely bedrock, fundamental founding principles. And if you look around all successful economies and democracies in the world, free speech is held, sacrosanct. It's held up, but not at the ABC, not on that show. Now that show is going to go live, go to air in a couple of weeks, I believe. And I'm going to be very curious to see what the editing's like on that. And it was kind of funny at the end of it. All the lecturers and they all lined up to debate me at the end of the show. So I had to debate one after the other. And it was just such a strange, surreal kind of thing. And this is what we have to deal with. And they have no self-awareness of where they sit. They're absolutely convinced, as they nod to each other and agree with each other, that this is the way the world works. Absolute certainty, John, absolute certainty. This is the enemy to free speech. This is the enemy to classical liberal ideas and philosophy. This is the enemy to conservatism. This is the reason why the CPAC network will exist and will flourish. This is the why eventually we'll get those 5,000 people that'll attend CPAC in Sydney, and it'll become the greatest conference in this country and one of the best in the world. And we will do that, won't we, Robert? We will do that. One of the key things that we'll do, and one of the key things that we've just put live, and one of the key things is probably a reason why we've had some few tech problems, is we've launched our own social media network. Stuff Facebook. I'm sick of them. Interestingly enough, in the free speech panel last night, one of the ABC commentators, one of the few that wasn't a lecturer at some university, on the subject of Facebook, said that Facebook cannot be trusted to control the crazy ideas of conservatives. He said, we cannot have an Australia where speech is unregulated and left to the likes of Facebook. What a dystopian, Orwellian kind of comment that you could make. Everyone is nodding. There's an agreement. This is the enemy. What can you do about it? We have some plans, Roger. We're all in beta testing, just like the AV was this evening. We're beta testing everything. We've got the app. Download the app. Download it tonight. Download it now. CPAC.network Australia. It's on the App Store. That's our own social network. It's your safe space, to use a term from the left. What else can we do? Speaking of safe spaces, and we all want to be safe. I want you conservatives to be safe. We don't practice social distancing. We practice socialism distancing. Stay safe. What else can we do? We can feature the best speakers in the country. We can get rooms like this and we can energize them. We can replicate this all over the country. And through this app and through this organization, we're going to leave it up to you. If you're out there in live stream land and you're hearing this, download the app. Contact me. If you have an initiative that you want to launch, use this network. This will be an Australia-wide network. Push it, use it, fulfill your dreams about how we're going to take take that word off the left and become true progressives and push this country forward. One of the main things that we can do at these events, itself is a great example of this, the energy in the room. Who went to CPAC here? I know the Goffs did, Robert, a few in the room. Tell me about the energy. I saw you. You're in the video taking on the That's damn good energy, right?
Don't let them speak bullshit.
Don't let them speak bullshit. The energy in that room needs to be replicated all over the country. It needs to happen on a monthly basis. We need to mobilise. We need to create a sense of fraternity. We need to support each other. And what else can we do? We need to profile and bring forward the best, brightest young minds and young speakers and young potential budding politicians and senators.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, for me, I appreciate your indulgence. The wonderful Jacinta Price, currently the Alice Springs Deputy Mayor. Oh, no, step down. Soon to be Northern Territory Senator for the Country Liberal Party. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Jacinta Price.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you to everyone who is here tonight in this room to support a wonderful, wonderful movement. And I'm incredibly proud to have been part of CPAC Australia from its beginnings in, well, it's 2019. And Erica Betts is right. If you've attended CPAC or you are wanting to attend a CPAC, well, then it's guaranteed that you will feel invigorated while you're there, and you will feel inspired to continue to fight for our values and to push on after you've been to CPAC. So for me, I hold conservative values dear to me because, as we all know, nations around the world, in our world history, it is evident that it is conservative values, Western democracies, that have been able to ensure that its people, its citizens have prospered, and that everyone has the opportunity to prosper. The opportunities are there, and it comes with self-responsibility. And for me, being a part Indigenous woman also, I could see the way in which socialism, the Marxist agenda has done everything to try to dismantle our institutions, our values, but in doing so have ensured that the most marginalised Australians remain the most marginalised in this country. And those people are very dear to me. They're people I love, people who I've watched suffer because of the stranglehold of socialism. If you want to see socialism at play in this country now, all you need to do is to visit a remote Indigenous community in the Northern Territory, in Western Australia, in South Australia, even parts of here in Queensland, and you will see socialism at play. So for me, it is so important that we continue to fight back. And we've all no doubt witnessed, some of us have probably become victims of this insidious, woke, left cancel culture that we're all faced with right at this moment. Don't know what I'm talking about. And I guess I've been one of those people throughout my life. You grow up in a place like Alice Springs, you grow up tough. You're not afraid of a bit of a fight, a bit of a challenge, if you like. I guess I'm one of these people that if I've seen a fellow human in distress or coming under attack or there's some sort of danger, I felt the need to run toward it as opposed to run away from it. And so it is so important that as Conservatives, we have the opportunity to reinvigorate ourselves, to understand that there is incredible support out there, that we're not alone in our efforts and in our fight, and that also you can stand and you can stand before those who try to attack you, those who try to bring you down, and you can weather anything. I've experienced it myself. And I think the trick is not to apologise. Not to apologise for believing in your values, for standing up for those values, and not to apologise so that the left can attempt to undermine you or to bring you down at the same time. And that to me is what's so important. This year has been a very significant year. This year celebrates 50 years since the wonderful Neville Bonner was first elected, who is, to me, has been very inspiring, particularly on my journey. And some of the reasons why he decided to join the Liberal Party, to become a Conservative, was because of the fact that Labor just assume that as an Indigenous person, you belong to the left, you belong to Labor. And this is something that absolutely irked Neville Bonner and probably gave him that little nudge to get over the line and sign up and become a member of the Liberal Party. And certainly for me, that has been my experience. That was the experience that my mother also went through as a former minister of the Giles government in the country Liberal Party. Before she entered into politics, she had been the chair of the Indigenous Advisory to the Labor Henderson government previously. And she felt extremely frustrated on that board because she felt as though she was just simply a token for Labor. That board was just a token board for Labor to appear as though they were the champions for Indigenous Australians. She soon found out that that wasn't the case. She felt like she was not being heard. And that pushed her to want to become part of the Country Liberal Party. She found amongst Conservatives, you can have conversations, you can debate ideas, you can agree to disagree and still respect one another. And so that was important to my mother, and of course is extremely important to myself. And we will fight tooth and nail also against the idea that that somehow, because we are of Indigenous heritage, that we must belong to the left. That to me is a racial stereotype that needs to be smashed. So another one of our crusades, was in fact my Conservative gay nephew said to me recently. In fact, he said, Auntie, you know, it's a lot easier to come out as gay these days than it is to come out as a Black Conservative. Which is absolutely true and very unfortunate, but there are a lot of them out there. And so for us, myself, the wonderful Warren Mundine, we decided some time ago that we wanted to start a Black Conservative movement in Australia, inspired of course by what we saw that was going on in the US, CPAC in the US, of course, Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell's sister, come on, like these are all people that Warren attended CPAC as well, and that absolutely invigorated him. We're extremely jealous I didn't get the opportunity to go over there, but that's what we want to do here in Australia, because I think it was recently John Howard's former pollsters said that he'd recently discovered that 60% of Indigenous people in this country in fact are Conservative. And that doesn't surprise me. It's just that they're amongst some of the most quiet Australians, and they're the ones that need support. Warren and others will be doing whatever we can to ensure that we can help these people find their voices and understand that there are other Conservatives that have their back in this country. So that's the next step, I guess, for my involvement, certainly in CPAC. And obviously, I hope a wonderful woman who's just walked through the door in the Senate next year, following our federal election. So thank you very much once again for your incredible support. And I felt it the first time I went into CPAC. I felt in a room with friends, those who understood me, who I understood, and it had nothing to do with the colour of our skin. It was based on the fact that we're human and we share the same values. And that is what we uphold in the face of the left, and the left can never truly claim that that's what they're about, because they're simply not. So thank you very much.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're making it up as we go along at this point. So I'd really like to hear from Senator Stoker, but I'm not sure. Are you ready to join us, Amanda Stoker? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Amanda Stoker. Now, Amanda's just come into the room, obviously. And Sky News, we're going live with Sky at 5 minutes past 8, Amanda. So your timing is impeccable. You've got 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes without notice to you can riff with the crowd.
Sounds like fun.
You just tell them.
If you can't have fun with this crowd, how can you? How can you? Right?
Spot on. Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda Stoker.
How is it that she gets more beautiful, more articulate, more formidable every time I see her? Jacinta Price, I can't wait until I can call you Senator Price. It's going to be amazing. Thank you, friends. Can I acknowledge the organisers of tonight, the team that runs CPAC here in Australia. Now, I know there's a lot of people involved, but we've got Rog and Fran, we've got Andrew, we've got Lyndall, and many, many more who do the organisation of events like this. But behind the scenes, I know there's also a lot of great supporters. And without what you do, there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Australians who wouldn't have the privilege of hearing the kind of common sense, practical, sensible things you just heard from Jacinta. And they would be the poorer for it. So thank you for the support you give to CPAC. That deserves a clap, by the way. Thank you very much for having me here with you tonight. I'm pretty humbled by the opportunity to come along. I was humbled a couple of years ago when Andrew Cooper asked me to go and speak at this thing called CPAC that was going to be in Sydney. And look, I confess I'd heard of CPAC in the US, but I didn't really know all that much about what was involved. Certainly hadn't been there myself, not quite that well travelled. And I said, yeah, all right, mate, sure. I guess you can talk about whatever you want. So, of course, being the utter nerd that I am, I said, okay, industrial relations. I think he probably wanted something a tiny bit more juicy than that. But anyway, I was all worked up to talk about industrial relations. And I prepared myself a nice little speech, ready for my trip to Sydney to go and join the crowd at CPAC for a weekend of interesting debates and thought-provoking speeches. Was really looking forward to it. And then on the last day of the parliamentary sitting week immediately beforehand, I was the temporary president of the Senate. So the president could go and do something else, have dinner or something much more fun. And I was sitting in the chair, and when you're in that role, you have to be very impartial. You can't participate in debate, got to follow the rules. I'm sitting in the chair, and Senator Keneally from New South Wales rises to her feet and starts talking about a convention of hate that was about to. I thought, oh, a convention of hate. Oh, conventions of hate, they sound bad. And then she started talking about how I was speaking at the convention of hate. I'm like, huh? I'm being a little bit facetious, but it is a terribly troubling thing, looking back on it, to think that one of the two parties of government in this country, it's as mainstream left as you are going to find, now thinks that a convention that brings together people from mainstream centre-right thought to talk about dangerous concepts like liberty, terribly dangerous concept, that one, is a purveyor of hate. It's a terribly scary thing. I reread my speech. Industrial relations. I'm just not finding it. Where's this hate? Now, look, it ended up being a blessing in disguise because dear Senator Keneally provided the best advertising campaign for free for CPAC beyond the wildest dreams of the organisers, and the conference was, as a consequence, a hit. But it speaks to something really troubling about the way people interact in a speech sense in this country. It speaks to the division in our community that somebody who engages in mainstream centre-right thought is branded by somebody on a mainstream left-wing party's front bench as a purveyor of hate. That should trouble us. It means that we can waste no time in investing in the importance of free speech, because it is not just our school children that are being told that the adage that sticks and stones may break your bones but words will never hurt me is in fact false, because that is what they teach in schools these days. Funny story, I said that to my daughter one day. She was complaining about how someone had said something she didn't like and how it upset her. I said, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. She said, yes, they do. And I said, no, darling, they don't. Words don't hurt you. The only way words can hurt you is if you choose to let them hurt you. And it's a bit like Eleanor Roosevelt once said, nobody can make you inferior without your consent. Words can only hurt you with your consent, if that makes sense. And anyway, so she didn't believe me. She thought I was making this nonsense up, and she was pretty sure that everything she'd been taught was wrong. And then, of all the songs she was listening to, Titanium, and young, bubbly enough to listen to David Guetta, and they, in that song, say, sticks and stones may break my bones, and she's like, say sticks and stones may break. So Mum said it and it's nothing, but Sia sings it and suddenly you're all for the power of words. And anyway, but we do have a generation of people who are being taught that words are violence instead of the opportunity to engage with people who think differently to you, to understand the shoes in which they walk, and then work together, refining those ideas by tossing them around to solve the problems we face as individuals, as communities, as a nation. If we deprive this country of the fruit of free speech, we will not just feel awkward talking about what we're really thinking in polite company. That'll be, we will be less free, we will be less wealthy, and we will be, in the broader sense of the term, spiritually poorer. Because if the essence of a meaningful life is about getting to understand each other, to form relationships with each other, to build friendships and trust and have ups and downs, and you can't do that if you can't speak your mind. You can't solve problems if we aren't free to, for instance, question the scientific method in academic work. Peter Ridd, anybody? And we will not have universities that are capable of doing the research necessary to solve the problems we face as a nation, if people cannot cope with the ideas that confront them. And we will not live willfully, and this affects those with the least in our community most. We will be denied prosperity if we lose our ability to be creative problem solvers. So when you come to CPAC, you're not just rocking up to play, although you might have some fun. You are equipping yourself and the people around you and the broader community who might tune in or might get the courage they need to be able to step up and share their voice. You might just empower enough quiet Australians to join you. And when you do, you don't just have fun, you change the face of this country for decades to come. It's an extraordinary thing. And so I want to thank you for being ahead of the curve, in a sense, by being at the launch of CPAC's network here in Australia. You'll be able to say you were a part of what grew this into the kind of training ground for great thoughts and great advocates. That doesn't just mean you might have one or two more politicians who can string a sentence together that makes sense from a conservative perspective, but instead will arm neighbours and work colleagues and friends to be able to confidently and courageously say bold and dangerous things like, how good is the free market? Because that's a pretty bold and dangerous thing to say in some quarters these days. Or equip them to say crazy things like, you know, I kind of like the traditional family. It kind of worked for me. Also controversial in some quarters, but what we do to give one another a voice, to empower people, to convince and take others on the journey, person by person, door by door, contact by contact, is without a doubt going to change the face of this country for decades. So thank you for being a part of it, and thank you for the role you will play in helping to make that enormous transformation a reality. It's an honour to be with you. Thank you very much.
Look, we're going to take a little bit of a pause here while Sky News do their thing. But while they're doing that thing, I just want to share with you just a couple of stories, that I think go to what Amanda was speaking of. And when CPAC was first under attack by the Labor Party, backgrounded by the Shadow Attorney General Mark Dreyfus, issuing legislation and threats of jail upon the organisers of CPAC, and attacking speakers like Amanda Stoker for being part of a cavalcade of hate for attending. When she first made that speech, and I'm talking about Christina Keneally, when she first made that speech in the Senate chambers, it was a 10-minute diatribe. The next day, I was waiting to see what would happen. Would the Liberal Party fold? Who step forward and put themselves in the firing line and support a conference that had been earmarked as a cavalcade event? And the first person that did it was Amanda Stoker. In one foul swoop, therefore justifying why she was one of the first people we invited to speak. She's been wonderful, in my opinion. Jacinta Price, the other speaker, if anyone has followed Jacinta on Twitter or social media, you'll see what she has to endure in order to just say the things that she says. Jacinta Price is incredibly brave. She's courageous, in my opinion. And her husband, Colin, is in the room, and things are just going to step up, aren't they, Colin? I hope you know what you're in for. Yeah, I'm sure he's very proud of her. And just one other quick story. And Lyndall, you know, I've told this story many times. And others in the room have heard this story. At CPAC, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of energy in the room. There was a lot of great speakers. And I had on 2 separate occasions, I had attendees come up to me. And they said to me, they started telling me the story about how, and they both had very similar stories. It was remarkable. They started telling me the stories about how, where they're from, you know, going to dinner parties was awful because they're all kind of woke and they're all so confident about their views, and how that when that school drop-offs, the mums used to look down on her because they thought of her as a conservative or someone that believes that socialism isn't necessarily the best thing for all of us. And both of these people, they burst into tears. They literally burst into tears. I mean, I get emotional myself just thinking about it. Just to think that, you know, that the emotional stress that those people must feel in their day-to-day lives, and they come to CPAC and it just bursts out of them. And I just think that's what we need to do. We need to carry forward and find those people in the niches of society, push forward the Amanda Stokers and the Jacinta Prices, and give these people the confidence to step up. These signs, your voice is your weapon. Once you start to speak up, it's amazing what can be done. You know, the floor then gets divided. It's not just left open. That's a little bit of a rant from me. I'm sorry about that. But there are in my mind, 3 very moving and courageous stories. 2 of them relate to the girls in front of us. We'll leave it to Sky. Perhaps you can relax for a moment. Thank you.
You don't need this. I mean, we mute you at the desk. Why not? No, we'll send him to the desk, but get rid of the what?
One, two, three, 4, 5. 1, 4, 5.
Jacinta to hold this down here. Could I get Jacinta to hold one down there? Her hands are out of shot. Jacinta, can I get you to hold the microphone? That one's as far as you can. Do the best we can to get it to the live stream, as well as
That's the worry.
Let us know when they tell you to shut the room. Let us know when they tell you to shut
It's important now. We need to make sure that Australia remains for the long term a place where the contest of ideas matters. And if we can think back to what the response those on the centre left gave to the first CPAC conference, it was to treat mainstream centre right thought as though it was hate speech. And that is a madness about which we should all be concerned. It needs to be the case that this is a country where people can listen to one another, respectfully disagree from time to time, point out the strengths and weaknesses in each other's points of view, and then get along civilly. But to shut down, de-platform, and try and remove from the public conversation ideas with which we disagree is really unhealthy. CPAC works because it has the courage to talk about things that in other places get shut down and shut out.
Yeah, look, absolutely. We do come from many different backgrounds here in Australia, culturally, religious backgrounds, linguistic backgrounds. But the wonderful thing about Australia, which we don't get to celebrate enough of, is the culture that we've created together in this country.
Yeah.
And that very much includes, well, that's the crux of what our Australians are. They have been under attack for many, many years by the left, by this insidious woke culture, cancel culture, all the sort of Marxist-driven ideology coming out from the left has been tearing apart the nation. And it's about time we fought for those values to be reinstated, to strengthen those values, because we don't recognise enough of what we've achieved together as Australians, regardless of what our cultural, linguistic heritage is, regardless of our ethnicity. We're all Australians in this country together, and we've all built this remarkable country to what it is now these days. So, yeah, look, it's absolutely important. It's why I've been very glad to be part of CPAC and going forward. And as I mentioned tonight, I want to encourage more Indigenous Australians to stand up and be proud of the fact that they are conservatives as well. Because I've come to learn recently that 60% of Indigenous Australians vote Conservative, but they are among some of the most quietest Australians. And CPAC is about supporting Conservatives of all different backgrounds in this country and upholding our values. So for me, that's really important. And going forward, myself, Warren Mundine, we want to encourage more Indigenous Australians to, well, some don't even recognise that they do hold conservative values, to recognise that that's part of who they are as individuals, and they've got support out there.
And look, Amanda talked about family values. I'll just hit on that quickly. I know you want to expand on this, Amanda, but in terms of family values, our family values have been under attack, most certainly from the left. But if we were to consider traditional Aboriginal cultural family values, then there in fact is no word for friend in Warrnambool in my family's language. Everyone is connected as kin. The idea of a friend, unrelated friend, is an alien notion, and they're the sorts of values that I think aren't understood well enough. When I grew up in Alice Springs, I was taught by my elders that anyone who was born in that area, regardless of their background, also had the dreaming totem within them from that land. And they're the values I was brought up on, they're family values, and they're the sorts of things that should make part of what this idea of reconciliation is, instead of reconciliation being weaponised and used against non-Indigenous Australians. So many ways we can do this.
And the more people talking about family values, talking about the value of the free market, the fact that it is capitalism that has raised more people out of poverty than anything else in the history of the world. The fact that free speech is what helps us solve our problems, and the fact that individual liberty is at the core of all of the institutions that make life in this country so great. The more people talk about that, the better. And for those people who feel as though the left have been so insidious that they don't feel comfortable talking about those things in polite company anymore, well, there is some polite company that wants to be with you in the room, and that is the CPAC network. And all in circumstances where those poor people aren't given a timeline on when they'll get an answer, are given oftentimes ridiculous instructions about how it is they're supposed to enter the state that is their home to attend the premises of the house that they pay for, that they pay the taxes on, for the rates that they have contributed. I mean, let's get real here. We need everybody in this country to get with the national plan and take the steps needed for us to return to a life of living safely but freely. And we need to be able to look back on this time with a critical eye to make sure that it doesn't become something that is too readily dipped into in future as the remedy of governments for
Unfortunately, we weren't able to share that information with you at this stage because we're not aware at this stage. But Thank you very much. And look, this is my sister from another mister. I look forward to being in the Senate with her.
When I don't have to social distance anymore, I'll be giving her all the We can be noisy again.
Okay, that was all a little bit weird, right? Just to say, after they unhook, they'll ask the girls whether they'd maybe take some questions. Amanda, Jacinta, do you think that would be wonderful? So just relax for a few minutes, and once they're free, we'll tether them again.
Yeah. After it's finished, people go.
Haven't lost any bits of bolts, have I?
No, it was the one that I found it like
Pretty impressive on this pack.
There we go. Yeah, and we'll fix up for that.
Thank you very much for making it as easy as possibly be.
Do I nod, Adrian?
Okay. Now we let loose. Is that all right? Do we need to break? He fires up all right, doesn't he? All good. Pleasure.
Take that with this, and then we'll question there.
Look, I'm going to ask you. You're not on television. Fruits to be converted, so I can give you.
So I'm going to ask a question that I think is good for you to answer. Last night I was on ABC free speech panel, right? 8 people involved. Was the only exactly. But there was someone there that said that ABC is necessary to remain because it protects minorities from attack by.
Well, I provided a submission with regard to ANC, and we were removed because we think it's doing more harm than it is good, because we can't address Indigenous issues from an honest.
So what I was going to ask you is, how do you feel about someone like her speaking on behalf of her? Because obviously not everyone speaks this way. They categorise everyone and pretend to speak for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone that's in their category. It's actually a user organisation. It doesn't matter. The head of this organisation, that organisation.
Well, they're not elected, are they? That's the other thing. It's like Aboriginal organisations, they're not elected representatives of our Aboriginal people, and yet they are always seen as the spokesperson.
I'll throw to you both about that, but and then throw to Roger for a question.
What would you like me to ask you?
That's probably the hardest question.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
Is there something you want to say to this sort of audience?
I reckon the hardest thing I can think of to ask me about is vaccination. And
the concern of people that they are being forced to practice.
All right.
Do you want to talk about that?
And I want you to wait for both of you. Different views. Yeah. So you're comfortable with that too? Yeah. No, I want the audience to get value, not me. So it's not one question.
People are nervous about.
Okay. All right, I'll ask you.
Happy with that? Thank you very much. Is it okay? Oh, that's not bad. She's bored tonight. We're dangerous.
You've got to push. All right, well, let's get in because we're running out of time.
This war going on. I actually get along with her okay. She's not that bad. But, I'll put something in my window to trigger her. To try and trigger me. I'm like, this is war.
So who's this?
Lydia Thorne.
Oh, okay.
So I'll put something in there. But if I won't, just the caricature that she puts on whenever she goes near a camera. She's just she wants your pony visits, but most of them are sort of nowhere near as courageous when you're in front of them and being nice. If you really need me to.
Make an appearance and then sneak out.
Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I'm fine. We were just everything was going on. I appreciate you.
I'll stay for a bit. We'll stay for entree or something. Is that all right? Stay for entree and then I'll.
That's not curious. That's actually. I wonder what they are.
When you said dates on the.
No, we have no dates. So it's actually the truth. You didn't lie.
I don't know when the dates are.
All right. So Dave, can you give the nod when we're on? When we're ready to go?
You're ready whenever you're ready to go.
What are you doing again?
What do you want to do?
I'm not live on the. So what was that?
Where I'm from, a few fingers pointing up. It's not quite so polite. You take the girl out of Campbelltown. Sometimes you can't take the Campbelltown out of the girl.
All right. I think I might. Okay.
And we're come a little bit further away from that lower. Goodness, I can feel the temperature difference.
Look who's here, ladies and gentlemen. I've graciously agreed to take some questions, and I'm going to, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm going to ask the first question. And it's to both of you. Last night on the ABC panel that I mentioned, there was
I know you're a masochist doing ABC panels. Yep,
yeah,
very good.
Yeah, I'm a slow learner. There was a representative there of an organisation that represented minorities, and the topic of 18C, Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act came up, and strangely enough, I was the only one that was against 18C out of the 8 that were involved. I was surprised. No, I wasn't. But the argument that was put was that 18C needs to remain because minorities need protection because they have special needs that structurally society imposes pressures and discrimination upon minorities and that they need special protection against words that are, or bad words that are spoken that they hear. And these words may, in fact, cause offence. And I'm mindful of your comments, Amanda. But Jacinta, how do you feel, you know, as a woman, a minority group, whatever that means, how do you feel when you hear people speak like that?
Part of a special needs group. Well, that's exactly how, you know, we're painted. It's stereotypical, and it's assuming. No, it's not assuming. It's defining, you know, people from minority groups as helpless victims who can't stand on our own 2 feet, think for ourselves. We're precious. We're easily hurt and easily offended, and constantly behind 8 ball will never amount to anything more than the fact that we're part of this victim minority. And I in fact provided a submission into the inquiry into whether, you know, 18C should remain or whether it should be removed. And I was one of those rare submissions that said, no, I think we should get rid of it. And I think we should get rid of it because what it does is all of those things that I've suggested with regard to minority groups, I think it belittles that minority groups in that regard. But it also it hinders conversations around how to improve the lives of marginalised people. Well, you know, when it comes to Indigenous Australians, marginalised Indigenous Australians and minorities. Because the minute you start talking about any of our issues, there's someone who's going to get offended and call you a racist or, you know, a bigot or something like that because they don't agree with the truth, basically. The truth offends them. So therefore, we have to ignore the elephant in the room. We have to sweep all our issues under the rug and pretend they don't exist and let them fester away. And that's the biggest hindrance that I see from 18C. And, you know, again, this representative of this organisation, like many representatives of organisations, how can they stand there and claim to be the voices of those groups when they haven't been clearly elected by those people? And they're making up on behalf of those people. And I find it utterly, well, I'm offended by that. You know, I find it insulting. But it happens all the time. I might have turned off. Must be your turn now to answer.
Look, it's hard to disagree with anything that Jacinta's had to say. This is a country built really on 2 streams of people, Indigenous Australians and migrants. One way or another, we all have a migrant history. At some time or another, we were all new. What well-meaning, I do genuinely think the people who put together Section 18C probably had their heart in the right place. What people like that do is condescend and infantilise people who are capable of enormous contributions to this country and stop them incentivising a culture of victimhood. And what a disservice that is to the great human potential that comes from the experiences of people who come to this country from all around the world. What a disservice that is to young Indigenous people who've got a passion to contribute something big. We owe everybody better than that. And so sections like 18C take away the right of people to, without facing adverse legal consequences, say things that might offend somebody or actually harming the people that we or those who put it together to protect.
Wow. I will pluck one random person out of the audience to ask the first audience question. Executive Chairman of CPAC Network.
Definitely not planned earlier.
Very random and people will know that.
Thank you, ladies. I'm going to be slightly controversial. We're conservatives, right? So we love freedom. We love freedom of choice. We value individual freedom very, 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 very much. So tell me your thoughts on vaccinations. Yes or no?
This has been one of the most difficult things, I think, for people on our side to confront in recent times. The federal government, and I'm somebody who has worked very, very hard to ensure that this position is something we do not lose sight of. The federal government has made it very clear from the outset that vaccination against COVID, while recommended, while non-doctor here suggests is a very sensible thing to do, is voluntary and must be voluntary, because decisions about what goes into your body have to be decisions for the person who owns that body. Thanks. Now, we've been consistent about that, and I'm really pleased to see, particularly in recent times, even our Prime Minister really firmly and forthrightly say vaccination has to be voluntary. But of course, the rubber hits the road when you start to apply that in places. And for the person who works in the COVID ward, as a nurse, but who doesn't especially want a vaccine for themselves, whether for religious or conscientious or even health reasons of their own, that can still present some pretty stark choices. One of my responsibilities is, of course, around industrial relations. And so the Fair Work Ombudsman gave us some guidance on this that is actually pretty forthright, pretty sensible. And it's the idea that you've got a sliding scale of occupations. Some are really high risk in a COVID sense, and some really aren't. If you work in the COVID ward or in the aged care ward, it is probably reasonable for an employer to say, you need to be vaccinated against this if you want to work here as part of protection for the people that you are caring for. It's not a new thing for employers to place conditions on employment. It's been the case that, for instance, vaccination has been required in some careers for a long time. I see Tamara, who works in the health sector, knowing that, and no doubt being very comfortable with the idea that vaccination is a sensible thing to do in some professions. But we do it in other ways too. We ask pilots to take an eye test regularly, and it's a condition of their employment. If you refuse to do the eye test, you can't be a pilot, and it's for pretty darn good reasons. But that tapers off pretty darn fast. The number of professions where it is going to be a genuinely reasonable requirement that a person be vaccinated, such that they need to make a personal choice about whether or not they keep their job or have a vaccination, and that's a pretty stark choice to ask anyone to make, has to be small. It's not reasonable to demand it of teachers, particularly as they teach a very low-risk cohort in our community. It's not reasonable in the construction sector. It's not reasonable in an office setting. It's not reasonable for working in a mine. And I'm pretty darn confident that as these things are challenged in the courts, those who are seeking to overreach in the employment context will find themselves reined in pretty quick smart. That's because our institutions, the institutions for which we fight, also understand, because we protect them, that individual liberty matters. And one way that we can show that is by protecting, wherever possible, the ability of individuals to choose what goes into their body. Now, I still think everyone should get a vaccine. I think vaccines are very sensible. Despite being under 40, I had AstraZeneca and fancy that I'm alive. But get the memo. It's TA show. But that should be a liberty we respect across the board and not just in the context of vaccination. Before I finish, and I know this has been a long answer, but I know it's hard and it's something that's on people's minds. It's really important that people understand under the national plan, there's 4 stages. When we get to the 4th stage, there is to be no distinction in any part of life between the way that vaccinated and unvaccinated people are treated. So to the extent that people in this room might be anxious that we might live in a country where it says, welcome to our restaurant, vaccinated only, or this pub is one where you're only welcome if you've had the jab. Any of those distinctions must be removed by the fourth stage of the plan, because this is not a country where we divide one another into classes. We don't do vaccination apartheid. And the Morrison government's plan from the outset has always been about a safe return to normal, not an adaptation into a society that adopts for the long term any of those unhealthy divisions. I hope that's reassuring for people who've had this on their mind.
Is this one working? Yes, it is working again. Okay, well, that was a wonderful response, I think. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Amanda has said. I'm fully vaccinated as well, but I do absolutely believe in an individual's choice to get vaccinated. I do not believe that it should be mandatory. It comes back to our very conservative values about individual liberty and our own personal responsibility as well. And it's difficult in the Northern Territory because we've got, firstly, we've got a Labor government, so that's one of the biggest hurdles to overcome. But also the fact that we have a lot of marginalised Australians in the Northern Territory, and a lot of misinformation that's gone about in communities for a lot of. There we go.
This is what I prepared earlier.
Yeah, thank you. for a lot of the Indigenous population who have struggled to really with education, which provides you with basic understanding and knowledge that you have freedom of choice, to be well informed about the decisions you make in your life, those sorts of things. And it's very easy for those vulnerable people to be influenced by things like social media, by extremist religious groups out in communities who are telling people that it's not God's way to be vaccinated. So there are some people that are just genuinely terrified by the idea of it, and there are some people, like a member of my family, who said, "Oh no, that's a white fella disease. We're not going to get it." But these are the things you have to counteract and you have to overcome and you have to provide. All those reasons are the reasons why Labor does so well in the bush, by the way, because Labor take advantage of vulnerable people in those places. But now they're in a position, because they're the territory government, where they have to encourage Indigenous Australians to take on the vaccination and get vaccinated, because some people are just outright refusing. But it leads us also to the problem where those individuals are largely dependent on welfare. So even if you say, look, you can lose your job if you don't get it, it's not going to bother them at the same time. So my concern, I guess, for the Territory is, a lot of these premiers and certainly Michael Gunner, our Chief Minister, like to change the goalposts along the way. And he has been doing that. There is no guarantee when we hit 80% vaccination rate that we will be able to have the sorts of freedoms that we'd like to have, that we will open up the rest of the country. And I do find it ridiculous that we've been divided by states and territories when we are one country. Absolutely. Yeah. And it does come down to individual responsibility once again. And at some point, that line is going to have to be drawn. Yes, we do have some very vulnerable people in the Northern Territory. And we have many who have the right to drink themselves to death in the Northern Territory. That is their right to do that. And so if it is an individual's right to do that, and our government can't help overcome this problem, well, then it is also that individuals are get vaccinated or not as well. So we're in a tricky position, obviously. And there's certainly our government has not strengthened the healthcare system to cope, should And COVID will come to the Northern Territory at some point. It just has to. It can't not get there eventually. But I do believe that people should have the right to choose as to whether they want to be vaccinated. But I don't think that those who have chosen to be vaccinated because they want to get on with their lives, they want to see our country open up, they want to get over to the other side of the world to see my in-laws, all of those sorts of things. I don't think we should be held back as a result of others' reluctance to go forward at the same time. We have to reestablish the Australia that we once had before as well. So that's where I stand on the issue.
So we do have a little bit of time to take a few questions from the audience. Just one rule: never hide an opinion or a statement inside a question. Shut you down. And I'll just make the observation that they've been handed a couple of pretty soft, 18C and vaccination, so perhaps Amanda and Jacinta can handle perhaps a tougher question. Let's see.
Do your worst.
Hey, John, Jacinta touched on it, but we're not one country, we're 7 at the moment. And the issue of federation, I think, needs to come into question. A national emergency should surely change the way we approach a one country approach. What's your views on that?
The constitution we have, thanks. The constitution we have contemplates the primacy of states over a federal government. The idea that really all power rests with the states, except for these couple of things we're going to flick to the feds. And over time, and with activist high courts, more and more of that has coalesced federally. It was never, though, the intention of the founding fathers, and for the feminists in the room, yes, they were fathers. Sadly, there were no women in the room. The founding fathers never intended that the borders between states be treated in a hard way. And I have a pretty strong view that if a case on Section 92 of the Constitution, which provides, among other things, that intercourse, as in movement, don't get carried away now, that intercourse between the states shall be absolutely free, was intended to prevent situations like this. We had a case testing that very early on in the piece, and it was run by Clive Palmer, and it wasn't successful. The court relied on concepts of what is proportionate in circumstances of a COVID crisis. But they also made it very clear that any small change in those underlying circumstances and the justification would no longer be there. I'm pretty firmly of the view that in the context of there now being a vaccine, of there now being a national plan for living safely with the virus that we are advancing down, that reconsidered, the courts would not say that closed borders are appropriate. We will shortly, and I'm being a little bit cheeky now, but if you can't do that at CPAC, where can you? We've got an election coming up. When our Premier starts to try and lock out the Prime Minister and members of Cabinet, or force them into quarantine, despite their double jab, for significant chunks of an election campaign, we also arguably have a breach of the implied freedom of political communication by the overreach of public health laws, for which there is very little in the way of factual foundation anymore. There's lots of ways you can look at the founding document of this country to say this should not stand. But your question, I think, was ultimately about reform. Do we reform the Constitution to make that happen? I am a real constitutional sentimentalist, and so this has been very hard for me as somebody who really does want to believe that the state's a great thing. But I think this time has shown us that the degree to which the Constitution has been mangled in the time since Federation by successive judgments of the High Court now means we need to, I think, as a country, have a serious conversation about constitutional reform and learn some lessons of the period and some of the things before.
Note, there we go. On that note, I'd probably support a referendum in that vein, as opposed to a referendum for a voice of parliament. Let's try that one. We don't create hard borders in this country.
Through a couple more. All right. Bryson, I think you had a question. What's your question? What question?
Boris Johnson ran this incredibly conservative against global warming, really. Actually wiped out the left in England on a, questioning the global warming narrative. But yet now, they both, Boris Johnson's gone full on into net zero by 2050. Morrison is obviously reluctant, but he's sort of holding back and following on. What on earth is going on? I mean,
thank you.
I'm incredibly reluctant.
What's the question?
I'm incredibly reluctant. But it really seems to me that our elected leaders are no longer running the country or the world. I mean, I've got video footage of most of the international leaders, Boris Johnson, Trudeau,
Right, we need
Clinton's,
to
I'm just about to finish. Trudeau, all of the Clintons, all of the most influential people in the world saying we've got to have the Great Reset, we've got to have the Great Reset. Build back better. We're all going to build back better. And I'm pleased to say that the only one who doesn't seem to have said that is Morrison. What on earth is going on with the Great Reset and build back better? Please, it's not a conspiracy. It's out there. They're saying it in their own mouth.
Okay, so if anyone couldn't hear at the back of the room, I'm going to sort of paraphrase that into what's going on with the Coalition's climate policy, and is there a bigger agenda that's about the Great Reset and Build Back Better? Is that fair enough? Yep, cool. Okay, so what you see around the world with those that dive headlong into environmentalist extremism as a lever to implement radical socialist ideas is what they have always been doing. That is what socialists have been doing for years. They've just found a new opportunity. They found environmental alarmism is the new lever to be able to do what they always wanted to do. So that doesn't surprise me. And to my mind, it's no greater a conspiracy than what we see from the communists who became socialists, who continued to march through our institutions, who continued to propagate cultural Marxism. Same. But when I come to the Morrison government's approach, I think it's a really sensible one, to be honest. Our PM's in a difficult position. He's got some MPs from the inner city who have very wealthy constituents who do not feel in their pocket the consequences of feel-good environmentalist policies like net zero by next week, because their job's not at risk and they can afford the higher energy cost. They're not going to face hypothermia out the back of Stanthorpe because they can't pay the increase in bill, and they're not going to face the end of their coal job and the inability to pay the mortgage and feed their family in the event that such a thing is brought in. It's very easy for those in wealthy inner city places to take that position. But the vast majority of Australians and the vast majority of the hold are in places in our outer suburbs and in our regional areas. And these people are not just the heart and soul of this country because they do the hard jobs and they raise the children and they build the communities and run the footy club and do the local singing group for the kids, all that sort of stuff. These are the active citizens who build this country. They need to ensure we don't have a policy that is environmentally extremist. And so the approach that the Morrison government's taken, I think, is really sensible. Be as clean as you can without being unreasonably expensive. Don't be dirty for its own sake, but also don't virtue signal on things that don't have an environmental impact. But most importantly, we can reduce emissions for all those people that are vexed by them using technology and not by making the essentials of life unaffordable for those who need it most. It's technology, not taxes. It's a very, very simple idea. We're prepared to keep investing in the technology that's needed to make sure every aspect of the supply chain, of industry, of agriculture becomes as clean and low emission as is possible. Sure, we'll back you in 100% to get the best practices you can. But we are not going to impose costs that mean the little old lady who lives in a cold area can't pay her heating, or that air conditioning becomes unaffordable when you live in far north Queensland, or that people no longer have a secure future in energy-intensive industries and mining. And I think that's all pretty common sense. I hope that's a straight enough answer for you.
I was just going to say, I'd like to talk about nuclear. Yeah.
All right, that brings us to the end of proceedings. I'd just like to say, I just want to thank you all for attending this launch event. It was under COVID conditions. Who knows what can happen under COVID conditions? But we got this away. Wouldn't have got it away without you, attending. It's been marvellous. I hope to see you all, CPAC. Some of you again. Thank you, Jill. She's very excited. I'm excited too. We're very excited. Also, just like to point out that for those that are attending the dinner, it's just down the hallway to the left, and they'll be plating up in about 5 minutes. But most of all, I want you to join with me in thanking our two marvellous speakers tonight. That's Senator Amanda Stoker and Senator-elect Jacinta Price. Okay, thank you. Who would have thought? I hope you enjoyed it. Actually, Jill, I want one of those. Come on, give me one of those. All right, you won't have much time.
Yeah, I'll move on.
To come in.
Honestly,
Roger, I just think you should come in and.
I've got my dear wife with me. What is she going to do?
Well, I think we've stuffed up the dinner.
So being in the chair and leader,
No. I think
let me mingle.
we need to come in though.
I'll come in, I'll mingle, and I'll chat, and it'll be lovely. And then
Hello.
take my seat.
Okay, I think that's brilliant.
And I am more than happy to
So if you're joining us, if you are still on the live and you're having watching. We're going to have a little wrap up in a moment, so don't go away. Stay with us for just a few more minutes.
Give me a call. I've got some
As people are leaving the event, we'll have a chat to a few people. Some moving off to the dinner now. But if you're at home watching on the live, please do stay with us. Damian Coory here from the other side. And we're not on? We are on, though?
Just here.
Okay. Just a reminder, folks, to check out the new CPAC.network app. If you haven't yet downloaded that, you might want to do that. And you can do that on the App Store under CPAC Australia. Well worth taking a look at. Sign on up. Certainly seeing a broadening of the base here, I think, which is great to see in Australia to get some more conservative commentary happening.
I got to work.
Are we on, David Pellowe, or am I talking to myself?
Which is, technology problems all night long.
Right.
But
It's all right.
we just figured out how to get a microphone for me.
Oh, well, that's essential. Without that, I have no one to talk to.
Well,
it's kind of sad.
Exactly right. We don't want to have to bounce back and forwards. We'll see if we can find somebody to.
All right, will you do
have
that?
A chat to.
Are we on camera? Is what I need to know.
I think this is our camera that we're talking
We're
to.
there. All right.
Is that the wrap-up signal or the keep going signal?
That's the keep going signal.
You don't want to
Let's
get
give it.
confused with those two.
So some great stuff tonight. What did you think?
Fantastic. Lots of people excited in the comments that I could see.
Yep.
Coming through, watching on the various channels that
It is
we're
exciting.
live streaming
It's
to.
exciting to see somebody like Amanda. One of the disappointing things, I think, is that Amanda wound up with a third position on the Queensland Senate ticket. It'd be lovely, but you don't have to follow. Nobody has to follow that.
No. It's incredibly important to choose your own preferences, to vote
That's
beneath
right.
the line.
Yep.
I think you only have to choose, 12 people beneath the line in the Senate ballot. If you number them yourself, that's really easy to do if you find a couple of parties and groups. But you know what? Put the Conservatives first and number beneath the line. It's something that it's really, really important to do if you want people like Senator Stoker.
And if you particularly like somebody, like Senator Stoker, if you like Campbell Newman, if you like Matt Canavan, if you like, you put them in the order you want to put them in Queensland.
Absolutely.
And in New South Wales, you can do also the same thing.
And you can split it across a lot of the right of centre, right-thinking
Yeah.
parties. You don't have to just use all one party and then another. You actually get to pick and choose from the best conservative, right-thinking people on offer. And you do have to choose from those people on
what
offer.
you think they are. And that's, of course, you'll never hear that from the major parties because they want you to follow their ticket, their recommendations.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that. You can choose for yourself how you want to do it. And I think, I think it's important that people make their own choice and look at the Conservatives on offer. But certainly Amanda's done an incredible job. Not surprising, but I'd like to say I was surprised that the Liberal National Party in Queensland didn't put her at number one, given that she's a young female. She's a
very, very controversial.
Very controversial decision.
Yeah.
So, but, that's what happens. And if you want to see people like Amanda in there, you've got to break that pattern, learn how the preferential voting system works.
It really proves the need for CPAC, that kind of caliber candidate can end up at number 3. Somebody who's so visible, who works so hard, so present, achieves so much, has a shadow ministry position, and then the Conservatives in the party just weren't organised and present enough to be able to make sure that she got the prime safe position on the ballot for that party.
Yeah.
Something that excited me tonight was, and a lot of people watching were excited as well, was Jacinta's sneak preview and hint about a black conservative movement for Australia.
Yeah, that'd be terrific to see. Sort of Candace Owens, Larry Elder type movement in Australia would be terrific. And to stop this kind of mindset of victimization. And we've been trying the same thing for how many years now?
Yes.
And we have very serious social problems, and must be very, very difficult within what is a very dominant left-wing Indigenous political environment in Australia to be a voice like Jacinta or like Warren Mundine and speak out.
Yeah.
And I mean, the flack they must get, within the community must be very, very difficult for them, but they do. And I think it'll only grow because they're on the right track and they're about solving the problems.
And this is an important thing for CPAC and the Black Conservative movement and people like that to articulate is there has been so much misrepresentation and outright deception about what Conservatives believe and hold valuable and stand for. And we certainly stand for the equality and dignity of all people, regardless of skin pigment. And we don't expect that somebody has to agree with us simply because of their skin pigment.
Well, it's one of the great tricks, one of the great sleights of hand of the left, isn't it, Dave? That, they do the old, the racists are the people who, worry about these things, really. And the people who worry about these things the most are the left. But I thought what was really exciting tonight was the diversity of people in the crowd. Yeah. CPAC's expanding. I'm here, and I wouldn't have classified myself as a right-wing conservative many years ago. You're a conservative. I'm more of a classical liberal libertarian. We've got Liberal Democrats in the room. We've got, staunch conservatives in the room. I'm sure there's people from UAP.
It really is there's not a lot of room for progressives in CPAC, but there is a lot of room for anybody who's thinking small government, big freedom.
Yeah.
And that's really what unites us all in common.
I think one of the things that struck me when I came back to Australia last year, there doesn't seem to be another side to the debate. And that's why I called my podcast The Other Side, because it's just such compared to what was going on in America, with very vibrant sort of debate, intellectual, intelligent debate on the right.
Yep.
In Australia, it's like the intellectual mood is only associated with the left, which fascinates me.
Do you want to try and catch the people?
I'll do that. I'm ranting, so I'll do that.
Okay.
You want to stay here?
I'll dance. I can't dance at all. I'm not going to do this.
Oh, you do want to say hi.
Damian.
Excellent.
G'day. Hi.
What's your name?
Tristan.
Okay, Tristan, what brought you to CPAC tonight?
See some great speakers, Jacinta Price, Amanda Stoker.
They were good, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
What stuck out to you about what they said?
The freedom of speech, how important that is, and how important our democratic and free values are to the fabric of this country, and we need to get that back.
Yeah, we don't hear a lot about those values on a regular basis in our mainstream media anymore, do we? It seems to be very much just everything through the prism of identity politics and perhaps left-wing sort of neo-Marxist movements. Is it the first time you've seen this?
No, I've seen Jacinta speak a few times at CIS, IPA, those sort of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not new to the conservative movement.
Absolutely not.
And how do you? I mean, I take it you're a bit younger than me, but how do you feel millennial Australia is going?
I think the feeling in millennial Australia is that we want to see things open up again, because the people in my age group are in those phases of their lives wanting to start families, build businesses, develop their careers, and if they're restricted in where they can go and where they can do those things, that's very frustrating. So.
And you guys are the ones who are going to be saddled with this debt.
Correct.
Are you worried about that?
Of course. I think, as I said, we're in that time of our lives where we're making, buying houses and that sort of thing. So debt's a very real prospect. And also, we're finishing, a lot of us have finished university, so we have tech debts and that to pay off. And so, yeah, that's a very real thing in front of our minds.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Tristan. Really appreciate you having a chat with us on the way out. Are you heading out? Would you like to just say a few words?
Well, this is really refreshing tonight to have so many people sharing ideas and sharing their thoughts in an open, free way, and it's what free speech is about. Respect for each other and respecting people's differences and moving forward as a country.
Can I ask your name?
Robert.
Robert, how long have you been associated with CPAC or involved with CPAC?
I was on the organising team for the first one in Sydney, right? And then I travelled to the US with Andrew, and I was one of the speakers at CPAC in the US with Donald Trump, and some of those people.
Oh wow! And how was that?
Fantastic experience. Yeah.
Wonderful. And are you happy with how the movement's going?
I think it's embryonic, but I believe there's a huge silent majority out there who need a place to belong. Most Conservatives are shy by nature and don't run down the street protesting and yelling and screaming or gluing themselves to a road to protest, but they have things that they grew up with: respect for each other, getting on with each other, and solving problems through respectful debate. And that's what we're fighting for.
I think it was Douglas Murray who said it's a little bit boring being a Conservative because you're waving a flag that says don't change anything.
Well, I think...
Although now we have a bit to change.
Well, I think that, my big inspiration is Jordan Peterson and the movement that he put around Australia. Thousands of young men said it was okay to be a young man. It was okay to work hard and make your bed in the morning and stand for something and build a better country.
Well, if you want to start, you can download the CPAC.network app on the Apple Store.
Fantastic. No, it's fantastic. I think every journey starts with a single step.
It does.
And this is a way for ordinary Australians from all walks of life, from all demographics, from all racial groups, to come together and say we believe in the power of the individual to flourish and build a better country.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for having a chat with us. There you have it. Dave, over to you.
Awesome. Well, I have the venerable John Bolton with me. John, you're a regular at CPAC. Tell me why you've been attracted to the CPAC brand. You're not a traditional Conservative, are you?
I'm not a member of any political party, but I am a classic Liberal. I think that our Australian Constitution and our High Court says that I'm entitled to do anything that I can think of doing until there is a law passed by a lawful government that says that I can't. And CPAC represents that for me.
So what about the CPAC movement from America are you familiar with, and its similarity in Australia? Obviously, the brands are associated. So what is it, do you think, that should attract most people who are right of centre, classical Liberals like yourself, as well as Conservatives?
When I first went to a CPAC conference in Australia, I didn't realise the connection with the USA. And I found that was great. When Nigel Farage came over and spoke, I found him to be a wonderful speaker in person, although I probably had disliked the representation that the ABC and the SBS put out about him, but he was a great speaker and said a lot of things that I agree with. Now, I don't agree with everything that CPAC and other people who say they're classical Liberals represent.
Sure.
But the great thing about this sort of thing is you can do it without having Antifa throwing rocks at you.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, speaking of rocks being thrown at you, did you have any negative experiences when you flagged to a few people that you'd be coming to a CPAC event this week?
One of the great things about CPAC is that it inspires classical Liberals to stand up at the dinner table. And when people say marriage between two men is the same as between a marriage between a man and a woman, I say that's not so. I know it's the Australian law.
Did that happen this week for you?
Yeah, it did. And when I was talking about coming to this conference here, and I was talking about, and I was describing Amanda Stoker, and I was describing the Jacinta Prize, both politicians in Australia who I admire greatly for their politics, and that has nothing to do with their sex, their gender, or their race. They're just great politicians. So I was talking about coming here, and I first of all described Jacinta the Jacinta Prize, and I didn't know anything much about her, apart from the fact she described herself as Walpurgis and Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on to describe Amanda Stoker, and I talked about her and her politics and how she was married and had children. And the left-wingers came up and they said, why are you talking about her children? What's that got to do with it? I'm saying, well, that's actually got a great deal to do with who we are as people. You know, when you have children, you have a different aspect on life than if you don't. And then I went on to compare that to the former Prime Minister of Australia, Julia Gillard, who had no children. And I said she shouldn't actually be making decisions for people who have children.
So were your dinner guests ultimately comfortable, or did they have a really strong reaction to what you were describing?
Well, they chose not to engage in the argument. And when they said, John, we don't care about your facts, that's sort of the end of the argument with left-wingers. Yes.
Thank you very much for talking to us. I'll let you get to dinner.
Julie, I've got here. Hello, Julie. How are you? Can you tell us why you're here tonight?
Well, long story. I'm actually
Can you
very
go the short version?
the short version. So I know one of the founding members. So I've grown up, and I've actually not grown up, but like listened to her and what she's had to say over the years, and I've become very interested in it. So it was more about tonight coming along to see what was it all about, and how my views are very similar to one of the founding members. So that's why I'm here.
Great. And what is your perception of where debate is in Australia at the moment? And then
It's actually very poor, because I think that as a conservative woman, that, you know, like, I feel we've reached the stage where we actually can't speak our own mind, and we can't say exactly what we really believe in, because people will judge you. And even people I know won't let you do that. And it's very sad. It's sad that our free voice is not being heard.
yeah, I've been astounded by the lack of diversity of debate in Australia these days, and the fact that there's not polite debate going on, not polite discussion. It's if you don't agree with us, then you're an evil person.
And I think too, you know, the events of the week where people have been, you know, scrutinised because they've got a religious belief, I found that really, really sad, that someone was being judged because they were a Catholic and they were married or whatever. He was elected into the role, and he was working for all his constituents. So I think that, you know, I think that we need to stand up and make our voices be heard.
Good on you, Julie. Thanks very much for coming along, and I hope people are out there listening and being inspired by what you've got to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Good time to go to dinner, I think.
Are you off to dinner now?
All right.
We've got one more person.
We have a
but,
man behind us.
There were a couple of
stop on the way by.
I feel bad. I've already heard from her all night. She needs to go.
You know,
go in.
she needs to go.
There's a bunch of people
This
who've
is a quick
paid a
wave
generous donation to have a smaller dinner.
By and by. Can we have a quick
I'm
hello?
going to other duties. Hello.
Hello. We're just talking to our
My microphone was first.
talking to our internet audience out there. So
Oh, hello. Thank you for supporting these nice fellows.
thank you, Amanda. We appreciate that. We'll have a more serious interview with the senator at another
he's-
time.
He's Lyndall.
Lyndall Maloney from CPAC. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Damian.
You had a tough week, I hear.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough week. It's all right, I survived.
It's all right. I won't bring it up if you don't want to.
That's all right. It just dog had very sharp teeth and got there off.
It's not a metaphor, ladies and gentlemen. Lyndall actually did get bitten by a wild dog, which is pretty horrible.
Yes, it was actually. But I'm here to tell the story, and we get out of bed every day because we've got to do what we love. And oh well, yes.
No dog's
well,
going to take you now.
well, someone said it was a left-wing dog. That's why I got bitten.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah, I know exactly.
There's a million lines there I'm not going to touch. Anyway, thank you for tonight. Are you happy with the way things went? It's still going, of course. You've got your dinner happening.
Lectures, and obviously we want to do better each and every time that we do the events. But we all love what we've got passion, and we're dedicated, and we're going to push back, and we're going to make sure that we make a difference. So it's good people like yourself, of course, that help us. All people can get on board to help us. We will just make this a success.
Well, I think there's a movement afoot, and it's a grassroots movement, and that's the thing that scares those in power the most. I think when the grassroots start to move and people start to organise. So tell us a little bit about CPAC.network. the app and how people can download it and all of that?
They can absolutely go to the Apple Store. Now, Andrew Cooper is probably the one more best placed to give you the details on that because he's really developed and worked through it. But I've been playing with it. It's fabulous. You can download it from the Apple Store. I think it's only available on iPhone at this stage, but I could be wrong. As I said, you'd have to check with Andrew. But it's fabulous. You can connect with other like-minded conservatives. You can use it as a messaging tool. You can connect the CPAC to the actual network. You can sort of have a look at who's on the advisory board. We've got some fabulous people behind us. We're getting more and more people reaching out to us, wanting to ask how they can help. We've even got people in America saying, we are so concerned what's going on in Australia. So we've got great support. But the app itself will be a great tool to connect with others who are like-minded conservatives.
Yeah, well, I've already downloaded it just tonight. There you go. So you'll find me on as Damian Coory or the Other Side Australia podcast. So I'll be using it to connect with people and hopefully getting some good guests on the show.
Thank you very much. And thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you, Lyndall. Very much appreciated. Over to David.
You going to dinner?
I'm going to dinner.
Awesome. Very good. Well, we've got one more person that we managed to snafu before the room emptied. Grant, welcome to the CPAC.network launch.
Thanks, Dave.
What do you think about politics in Australia just generally at the moment?
Generally, I'm quite concerned actually at the level of division. I've watched it in America the last few years, but in Australia as well, the polarisation of everything is really quite disturbing. I mean, watching the animosity, the anger, the refusal to talk to other sides and so on really concerns me. And I think it's been really highlighted and exacerbated a lot more of this whole COVID period too. You know, it's not good.
100%. Do you think CPAC's going to provide any solutions to the problems you've identified or other solutions that are needed in Australia?
Actually, I'm really excited about CPAC because I think with the name that it's already got and the connections that it'll have there, it'll provide a really good coordinated group for lobbying, for conservative activism, basically take on Get Up and to present the other side of the argument in a much more cohesive, loud way as well, which is good. Get the message out there and force discussion on things rather than just hiding.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Where's Damian gone? Damian has signed off for the night.
I would never leave you in the lurch, David. I would never do that. Never do that.
Well, that's it for the night.
It is.
I mean, you're already at beer o'clock.
I'm at beer. Well, it's well and truly beer o'clock. So yes, I have to drive home though. So, it'd be a good
so
responsible
for those people who don't know your name, haven't heard of you yet, obviously we're coming on your Facebook page, but also on the CPAC channel and my own channel.
Yeah, well, this whole, as I was just saying to Lyndall, you know, it's a grassroots movement. We're really starting to see a lot of the incredible work that you've done with the Good Source platform and Church and State. And I know you're moving into doing a few more things, but yes, the Discernible platform in Melbourne, Matthew Wong, lots of people out there probably listening and watching now would know Discernible pretty well. We're on that. The show is called The Other Side Australia. I'm Damian Coory, former ABC. For ABC Network 10, ABC when it wasn't what it is today.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, well, it used to be a little bit more balanced. But it really, I would say about the ABC now, it's full of extraordinary people who couldn't find the exit in the last 30 years.
You left the ABC how long ago?
1989.
Okay, so it's probably been about 32 or so years since the ABC had a conservative right-thinking person on its platform.
Yeah, and I'm not sure you could have described me as that back then. But anyway, there you go.
Maybe longer.
I was very young. I was a baby. But in those days we brought our idealistic youth into the environment, and we had our views, but we had grown-ups in the room, you know, to bring us into line and to sort of balance things out. And there was a strong conservative Liberal Party component to the ABC, of the sort of, you know, people who believe the ABC had a role to play in preserving traditional values of Australia, as well as the young progressives. And I think we had that happening in those days, and it was great. Nowadays, those people have all left. All the Triple J crowd have grown up. I'm only half joking when I say this. And they're now in charge. And they're all over the mainstream media. So that's
and the mainstream media on bulk is very
Andrew Cooper's laughing at me. Come over here, Andrew Cooper. You're not getting away. You're not getting away with that. You must be. There's Damian bucking the ABC.
I didn't hear what you were saying, but you're enjoying whatever you were saying. So.
I always do, Andrew. You happy with how everything went today? It was great.
Well, I mean, it's a start, right? So the game starts now. So that's the main thing. And hopefully, we're an organisation that will attract a lot of support and people that are prepared to do something and step up. Because most organisations can't rely on, the management to do, particularly grassroots organisations. It's a grassroots organisation, and we need people to get on board and step up.
Tell us about the app. What's special and unique about the app? Why people would want to download that right now?
Well, the app is our attempt to take control of our own destiny and our own speech, basically, our own activities. So, we've invested in the app, as you know, and I think by using the app, and I hate using this term, but it's kind of like it's a safe space. We're not a big platform here. We expect people to be civil, right? That's not, free speech does not mean that you can come into my house and abuse me. Yeah. It's my house. And this is our house, right? And so we have conservatives in the main, a pretty civil, a pretty civil mob. Did you read the Lee Sales article, the ABC? Lee Sales, it's a very interesting published article, and she talked about how it's the left-wing mob that attack her more. It's that attack an ABC journalist. It's the left-wing mob that attack her and diminish her, and it's the reason that she's got off Twitter, right? So that are behaving badly. There are people that do behave badly. They're not part of us. They're not part of our organisation. No. So the app is our attempt to take control of our own destiny in some ways, and also to organise ourselves, to support each other, to energise ourselves, to organise meetings, to create groups that achieve objectives that are activist grassroots style objectives. And I'm really excited about using it. I've just started. It's literally just dropped 2 days ago, and I'm already using it all the time. I've cancelled Signal. You know this. I cancelled Signal. I cancelled Telegram. I cancelled Facebook. Actually, I haven't quite cancelled Facebook yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
He told me today, no more reaching me on Signal or SMS or anything other than the CPAC app.
How do you download it? And just for everybody out there,
it's on the Play Store and on iOS on the Apple Store. So you do need to download it from those social media groups.
And that's the Google Play Store if you've got an Android phone, Apple if you've got an iOS.
Yeah, that's correct, Damian. Yeah. So just download it, join up, connect with me, connect with whoever's there, and let's get busy. Let's get some stuff done.
Okay, and it's the point you made about grassroots. I think is really important because you have a lot of people starting things these days, making an effort. And what I like about what you're doing is trying to bring us all together, bring everybody together. And also encourage people or give people the tools that they need to self-empower, right?
Yeah, I think so. And it's not what I'm doing; it's what we're doing, right? This is an organisation that is not owned by me. I'm not there's no shareholders. This is a non-profit organisation that owns the CPAC conference. And it's there. There are assets within that are valuable. The conference is valuable, but the greatest asset this organisation will have will be the people in it. And so I just encourage anyone out there, just download the app, get involved, and take charge of your own destiny. Don't sit back and let things control you.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right. Founder of CPAC, I know you got to go and entertain your dinner guests. So have a great night. Take care. Thanks a lot, Andrew Cooper. And I think that's great advice. It really does come to. It's one thing to sort of sit at home, be a keyboard warrior, but we need more people, and it doesn't matter where on the spectrum. As I said before, it doesn't matter where on the spectrum you fall.
Yep.
It's a broad church, as they say. What unites us,
excluding those big government anti-liberty people.
Yeah, but I think
not overly broad.
That would be the left. But that's the point, right? I mean,
exactly
what unites us is the fact that the one thing that we all agree on is that we see our country falling into the hands of an ideology that is problematic, and it can fall. As I said, I come from Hong Kong. Falls pretty fast. I got to tell you,
it does.
It falls.
Well, that's a good note to wrap the night up on. Welcome to the CPAC.network. Make sure you download the app. Make sure you stay tuned. And there's more exciting things to come. As Andrew said, this is just the beginning.
Indeed. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Empty room.
Sorry, I didn't. We needed to wrap it up.
Great.
Sorry about that. I will.